Alright, welcome back to Measurements of Economic Performance, video 2.2. In this one we deal with the expanded circular flow diagram. Alright, so where do households make their money from? So sources of household income include the fact that we own the factors of production as mentioned in the previous video, as well as we get money from, or households get money from stocks, bonds, and government transfers. Okay, and we will talk about each of these specifically. Alright, a stock very simply is a share of ownership in a company. So if you own stock in Apple or Google or whatever company it is, you own a very, very, very small piece of that company. So that is a stock, and you as a household can make money from that. You also can make money from bonds. Bonds, how they work, the investor lends money to a borrower for a specified time and they receive interest in return. Alright, so really what this is, because you might hear about people investing and buying bonds. If you buy bonds as a way of investing, what you're really doing, so let's say that you buy a bond from a company, or it can be from the government. Let's just use the US government as the example. You buy a United States Treasury bond. What you are doing, so you buy the $1,000 bond. You are letting the government borrow $1,000. So they have that $1,000 now, and they can spend it and do whatever they need to with that $1,000. When you buy that bond, however, there is a certain date when that bond will come due. And it can be anywhere from a day, a week, to 30 years or more, okay? And so when that time comes, you'll get that exact amount back. All along the way, though, between, you'll be receiving interest payments. So that's why you do that. So you lend money to somebody, you get interest all the way, and then you get the entire amount paid back in full on the date that it comes due, okay? So that's the basics of a bond. We'll talk more about them in Unit 4. Another way that households receive income, so a third source of income for households, is a government transfer. These are payments that the government makes to individuals, and they do not receive a good or service in return. Okay? So this is actually an important distinction to make, because there is a difference between government transfers and government spending. If the government is spending money, they are buying something. So they are buying a good or a service, and in exchange for that, they pay the person or the company money. Government transfers, the government doesn't receive anything. They don't get a good or service back. They are simply transferring money to people. So a good example of that is Social Security. You don't have to do anything. When you qualify and you're older, you've already qualified because you worked previously. The government transfers, they give you a certain amount of money each month, and you don't do anything for that. You don't provide a good or service to the government in exchange for that money. Welfare programs, unemployment benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, these would be examples of government transfers. Alright, so now when we talk about household income, we have something called disposable income. Alright, and I have a couple different ways for you to express that. One's more mathematically, one is with the words all written out in non-variable form. So using variables, it's going to be Y, D, and because this is a macro class, we're looking at the entire economy, we're going to use capital Y and a capital D for disposable income. If you did lowercase y and lowercase d, that would be denoting of an individual. Okay, so we're talking about the disposable income for the country as a whole, being that this is macro. Equals y plus tr minus t. And what that really means is that the disposable income is equal to income, so y, and that's going to be this way for the whole year. Y, that variable y is income. I is going to be something else that we'll get to possibly even in this video. If not this one, it's going to be the next. So disposable income equals income plus transfers minus taxes. So income is the amount of money that you earn. We know that you don't get to keep all of that, but the government takes their share, and that's taxes. So we subtract taxes. Some people will receive transfers from the government, so we have to add that in. So disposable income is what's left over after you pay your taxes and receive your transfers. So income plus transfers minus taxes. Alright, so now we've talked about the sources of household income. Well, where does it go? What do they spend it on? So we have a few things: consumer spending, taxes, or they save it. So let's go into that now. Alright, consumer spending is very simple. It is household spending on goods and services. In fact, this is the largest share of where our money goes. So households, most of the spending that households do comes in the form of consumer spending. Alright, and you see here on this chart, you might want to pause it and you can look at it. It gives you from the Department of Labor I'm not sure what year this is, 2009 it looks like, how much money the average family spends per year, as well as their income, things like that. All right, so that's consumer spending. They don't spend everything that they make, so we can spend or save. So the reason that these are lowercase is because we're talking about for an individual person here. I could do this at the macro level and have it be in caps, and it would be the same thing. Private savings, so savings of individual people, is equal to disposable income minus consumer spending. So figure out what our disposable income was, so we subtract taxes and add transfers to our income, and that equals our disposable income. Now we want to know how much we save as individuals, private citizens. You have to subtract what we spent. So disposable income, YD minus C, and C is for consumption or consumer spending. The S is going to be for savings. Again, all of these variables, they're not going to change throughout this course. So S is going to be savings, YD is disposable income still, C is consumption or consumer spending. All right. Another thing that we do with our money is we put it into financial markets, and this is actually a way that we save. Okay, so at the basic level, there's only two things we do with our money. We either spend it, consume, or we save it. One way that we save, typically the way that we save, isn't that we put it under our bed, under our mattress, or in a shoebox. That would be a terrible way to save. We're going to put it into financial markets. Unit 4, we talk about financial markets in great detail, so this is a basic introduction at the moment. Financial markets are defined as banking, stock, and bond markets. They allow private savings to be used for investment spending and government borrowing. Okay, there's actually a lot of important ideas in that definition. It doesn't seem like it, but it really is. So we've talked about stocks, owning a share of a company, bonds, letting a company or the government borrow money from you. Banks, they let individuals borrow money. When we put our money into any of those things, into a bank, into stocks, or into bonds, that's dealing with a financial market. And what happens is, instead of our savings just sitting in a shoebox, they're actually able to be used for something to grow the economy. We haven't really defined investment spending just yet, so we will get to that. But the source of investment spending is going to be private savings. That's where our investment spending comes from. It comes from private savings, and that'll be an important concept later on. Hey, let's define investment spending. All right, what do you know? All right, investment spending. The biggest thing that I need you to know, so you have a definition in front of you that you can write down. I need to make it very, very clear what investment spending is not. It is not investing in the stock market or investing in the bond market. We think of that because typically that's what you hear, the word investment used to, oh, you should invest, and we think of buying stocks. That is not investment spending. That, in this class, in macroeconomics, that is simply private savings, okay? That is putting your money into a financial market. That's it. Investment spending is when we spend money on new physical capital, so machinery, buildings, factories, something that we are going to use to make something else. We build a new restaurant. We're engaging in investment spending. Changes in inventories as well. So if we, our inventory, our supply of whatever it is that we produce is low, and we buy more of that stuff, we produce more of it, that's engaging in investment spending. So it's new physical capital, machinery, buildings, factories, changes in inventories. And what we're going to find is that investment spending is really the thing above just about all else that really drives growth in our economy. Investment spending is vital to an economy growing. So that is our next component here. Where do we get the money to pay for machinery for buildings? We get it from private savings. So again, to backtrack, to make sure that we're okay on this, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this part. Most people, so let's say that you, personally, you have a great idea for a business, and it is a legitimately good idea. More than likely, you don't currently, right now, as an 18-year-old, have the money to be able to go and to produce that thing in a mass quantity to where it can truly, affect the economy and become widely distributed. You probably don't have that ability. So what you do, so that you can still carry out that good idea and create that product that you're trying to make, invent something new, you probably need to borrow money. All right? So there's a few ways for you to do that. If you're a small business, you might be borrowing simply from a bank. Okay, that's probably the way that you'll do it. So the key thing is that the only way you can borrow that money is if somebody saved it first. Somebody must have saved those dollars. Then they put it in the bank in a savings account, and then the bank lends that money out to you, the borrower. And then you can engage in investment spending. You could also sell shares of your company if you're creating a company. That's a major way that most companies raise money. Is that the reason that they sell shares of their company is so that they have more money, so that they can engage in more investment spending to build more physical capital, to build more of their product. Okay, or they could borrow money by selling bonds. But the key thing of all of these that they have in common is that our private savings are used to finance investment spending. So without private savings, there is no investment spending. Okay. Inventories, all right, so I kind of touched on that. They are goods and raw materials held to facilitate operations. So the basic idea, picture, and you have the picture here of like a large warehouse. Companies typically have more on hand at any given time than they need, just in case. They don't usually just make everything to order. So the idea here is pretty simple. If they have low inventories, they are going to engage in more investment spending. If their inventories are full, then they're going to engage in less future investment spending because they don't need as much. But that's not a huge part of this yet. All right, government borrowing. Defining, again, we're defining a lot of terms here that are going to be very important throughout the year. That's why I'm taking my time on this. Government borrowing is the amount of money borrowed by the government in financial markets. Typically, the way that the federal government borrows is by issuing bonds, which I kind of already described. So again, the government can't borrow what hasn't been saved by somebody. Okay, this has been a LaMoney production.